Final pre-fight video, Vyacheslav Glazkov versus Charles Martin. Now I did an initial thoughts video on this fight, must have been a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I said that I thought Charles Martin was actually underrated in this fight. Briefly, what I said in that video is Glazkov is a skilled boxer, but he's nothing more than ABC really. He's not got much power, he's not got much size, and I felt personally that he got outboxed by Malik Scott and Derek Rossi. You know, I felt there was nothing special there. I didn't think he had an X factor. I didn't think he had too much upside to his game. Now, Charles Martin is the joker in the pack, if you like. Charles Martin is a guy without any big fight experience. You know, he hasn't fought the Thomas Ademics. He hasn't fought the Malik Scotts. You know, let's be honest. A couple of fights ago, he was fighting Tom Dallas. You know, he's fought a woeful level of opposition. He's also managed to do it without looking overly technical, overly slick. But I do believe Charles Martin has a higher upside than Glazkov. You know, Charles Martin has high punch output. He has good power, much better power than Glazkov. He can punch to the body. He's actually got punch variety. Yeah, there's a lot to like about Glazkov, and apart from anything else, he's a 6'5", 6'6" southpaw, and a really big build lump at that. Yeah, he's going to be a lot bigger man in there on the night than Glazkov. You know, there's a lot to like. I mean, if you've got a 6'6" southpaw who's a massive lump, can punch really hard, digs to the body nicely, and has a cheeky uppercut and a hook in there, you know, he's beating most fighters. And Glazkov I kind of see as a limited operator, to be honest. So my initial feeling was to side with Charles Martin. I've then watched more tapes of both. You know, Glazkov has got certain things going for him. He's well schooled. You know, he's a much more schooled operator than Charles Martin is. He's got a good jab, Glazkov, and I think that's a key thing for Charles Martin. You know, Charles Martin, when he's fought lower opposition, has kind of stood in front of people. I really want him to avoid doing that in this fight, because whilst he's probably got more range and more reach, than Glazkov, Glazkov's jab is superior. So I think Charles Martin needs to kind of take that jab away from him. And the way he's going to do that, for my money, is the fact that he is a bigger guy. You know, use your reach. Try and stay long and put your jab in his face. You know, use your range, use your natural advantage. Now, I recently watched the Charles Martin versus Zambano Love fight. And that's an interesting fight. You know, Zambano Love is a relatively durable journeyman, but Anthony Joshua destroyed him in 1 or 2 rounds and, you know, knocked him out cold. Charles Martin sort of stopped him in the 10th round, made him take a knee with a barrage of punches. You know, that fight, there were pros and cons there. What amazed me is that even in the 10th round, for such a big lump, Martin was coming forward and, you know, throwing bomb after bomb after bomb, even in the 10th round. You know, he was throwing bad intention punches, just one after the other. And I was actually very surprised that for such a big guy, without big experience of going late in fights, he was able to keep that punch output up. However, he was a little bit wild. Now, maybe it was because he was against Zambano Love and he knew Zambano Love was no danger. But his hands were nowhere to be seen. He was punching and, you know, holding his hands by his waist. And quite literally, he was just standing in front of his opponent, swinging from the hip like this. You know, there was no movement, there was no defence at all. And he was wild, you know, he was wild. This was not the performance of an ultra-schooled, ultra-technical, sophisticated amateur boxer. This was more of a street fight in the 10th round, to be honest. And it was a bullying, bigger man wearing an opponent down. And credit to Charles Martin for doing that. I just feel he will need to be slightly more sophisticated against Glazkov, because Glazkov has got that amateur pedigree. And if Glazkov sees you with no guard, he's going to throw a jab, hit you with a scoring punch, get out of there. You know, he's going to do you in that sense. You know, Glazkov, he's not the biggest puncher in the world, and Martin has a substantial size advantage. Obviously, we don't know what Martin's punch resistance like because he hasn't fought at any level, but I don't think Glazkov is necessarily going to go in there and be able to bomb out Charles Martin. I just don't see him as that kind of fighter. I think Glazkov, his best bet is to move, box, and try and just look by far the more sophisticated operator and jab his way and box his way to a 12-round decision win. With Charles Martin, I think he's got two options. Option one is to try and box with Glazkov, and I think the only way he's going to succeed in doing that is if he takes away Glazkov's jab. And the way he's going to have to do that is by putting in a far more disciplined performance and a career best performance. He's going to have to keep his hands up. He's going to have to consistently pump out that right southpaw jab consistently. You know, keeping Glazkov at range, preventing Glazkov from throwing his own punch. That's option one. You know, if he fights behind that jab for 12 rounds, shows that he's in very good condition, and you know, negates the smaller man's jab, he can do this. I mean, let's be honest. Charles Martin may not be the most sophisticated boxer in the world, but it's Derek Rossi. And Derek Rossi gave this guy all he could handle, you know, all he could handle. So that's plan one that can be implemented by Charles Martin. The other thing is his power. You know, can he find a way of stopping Glazkov? Can he really put it on him? Can he force his strength on him and the fact that Glazkov's a much smaller man? Yeah, can he hit him over and over again to the body, over and over again up close? Can he make it really, really uncomfortable for Glazkov and, you know, get him out of there, break his will? You know, both of those are options. Both of those are options. And I'm really torn in this fight. You know, heart is saying Martin. I see Martin as a more entertaining fighter. I see him as a more interesting fighter. And as I say, he's got more upside. I'm just slightly worried, having seen more and more tapes of both men, that this may be too soon for Martin. You know, his build-up to this fight has been absolutely woeful. And in many ways, it's such a shame he didn't have the opportunity to fight Dominic Breazeale before this. You know, he hasn't had any of the advantages of an Anthony Joshua or a Dillian White or a Joseph Parker. There's not been a Brian Minto fight. There's not been a Kevin Johnson fight. He hasn't had that kind of education on the way up. And I kind of wonder if it is too much too soon to go in against a guy who has some level of boxing sophistication like Glazkov. And I'm tired, you know, whilst I like unbeaten young fighters with power and huge upside, there are just a few things in Martin's game which do make me think this has come too early for him. You know, the lack of defence, the lack of experience going the championship distance, and the fact that he's just a bit wild and slightly sloppy in terms of his technique. Glazkov, as I say, the better jabber, the slicker operator, the more schooled, but concerns remain over him as well. You know, the Malik Scott fight, the Derek Rossi fight, the fact that he's just a small guy who's overly reliant on his jab and carrying limited power. You know, he may well have enough to beat Martin. He may well beat Martin easily, just outboxing him in over 12. But I really do see him as a limited operator, you know. I think if Glazkov becomes world champion, he is a very, very easy mark. You know, I think there's a lot of fighters in the current heavyweight division who beat Glazkov. And whilst I'm struggling with a prediction here, whilst I've kind of changed my mind on this several times, I am actually going to stick my neck out and say that in a close fight, I'm going to pick Charles Martin. It's going to need to be a career best from Charles Martin. He's going to need to raise his game to all new levels. But if there's any time that a man can do that, it's in a world heavyweight title fight. This is Martin's big chance. This is big opportunity. This is the one night that will be remembered for him. And I think he's got the size. I think he's got the power. And I think he's got the upside to get the job done in a tight fight. I'm picking Martin. Will it be a KO or will it be points? I'm actually going to go with a KO. You know, I think Martin has been underrated in terms of his punching power, and the trouble that Glazkov's been given by opponents who don't punch quite as hard as him. I just think at some point Glazkov is going to find himself in deep waters at the end of a Charles Martin straight left or a Charles Martin hook or an uppercut up close. I'm going Charles Martin stoppage. Risky pick. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this one, give me the thumbs up. I've got a video on Wilder versus Spilker up. I'm going to do post fights of both. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts afterwards, please subscribe to the channel. I wouldn't want you to miss out on those. Thanks a lot.